Yeah, I'm just trying to stay connected to you. Sometimes life can make you feel like you lose. If I ever leave you, what's the use? Only you.
Yo, what is going on, F3 fam? This is your boy DJ Roberts with the Faith, Family, and Fortune podcast, where I help give you strength, encouragement, and wisdom to deal with everything that life throws you. If you're wondering what that song was about, that is the Christian hip-hop artist E2, and that song title was You Love Me. The link, I'll put that in the description for this podcast episode. But listen, I want y'all to support. I want y'all to share his information. I want y'all to go purchase and download his music. He's awesome. He's got so many great songs. And many of you may not know this. His whole family just recently went through a lot of traumas where their son was diagnosed with a specific type of cancer. And so they have been overcoming that, and that has fueled these latest songs and these singles that he's been coming out with. And it's just been awesome. He's an awesome artist. So go ahead and support good music, y'all. Now, listen, I believe that this podcast episode is going to be very important, very specific. I'm going to try and keep it as brief as possible. However, I really want y'all to get the meat of this episode. And I believe that as we're dead in the center of the COVID-19 crisis, this is extremely relevant. When so many people are without jobs, so many people are left struggling, and you have many that are confused and don't know what to do, and they still have people that are dependent on them. But if you're not careful, you can ignore your own situation and continue trying to save the world, and you can leave yourself and the people depending on you in a much, much worse situation. So this podcast title is Feed Yourself First. I'll get into a little bit later exactly what that means, but it's feed yourself first. Now, many CEOs, world leaders, and such are stepping down right now. We're seeing a huge step down, not just because of this situation, but there's other things going on, such as the Me Too movement. People are being fired because they've been caught up in scandals and things are going on, right? There's so many people that have just tried to continue business as usual, but they're neglecting themselves, their relationship with God. They're neglecting their families, and so on and so forth. And so many of these people who are basically otherwise good people, some of them even great, however, their lives are now defined by one huge mistake. And I want to help prevent you from basically doing the same thing or the same thing happening to you. And we're going to do that by covering ways to recognize when you're neglecting yourself. And I'll share with you 3 actions to take to get past this in your life. Now, you can continue to give encouraging words to others and conduct business as usual on autopilot. I believe many of us, especially leaders, really struggle with that, right? We still continue to try to give, and we're kind of on autopilot even when your tank is empty. But you'll soon realize that you don't have anything to give. Your words kind of dry up because you don't really even live by them anymore or believe them after a while. And so that becomes a huge, scary thing where now you're just an empty shell of the person that you once were. You may have started believing in what you did, but all of a sudden it's become something different. And that's why when you see different organizations or you see different business leaders who started off with a great intention, and all of a sudden 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line, the whole vision completely changes into something else that you never thought it would. And it's not necessarily a good thing. Sometimes people change for the better. Other times, people just get caught up in the situations and they don't really change for the worse. So we're going to help prevent that and help you to change for the better. You feel me? Now, believe me, nobody wants to feel like they are a fraud, but it's easier than you think to begin that slow fade down the road of losing yourself on the altar of your ambition or your passion or your purpose. Now, you want to produce, encourage, and give out of your overflow. This is what you're supposed to do. You don't give out of your lack always. Now, sometimes there are times when you can give out of your lack, but for the most part, depending on where you are, you want to produce and encourage and make a habit of giving out of your overflow. That is to say that you're so full of joy, so full of life that you have to spread it around. So that's the place. That's operating from a healthy place, right? So you want to definitely operate from a place where you're healthy and sustainable. That doesn't mean that you don't go through things, right? But you have to know your thresholds. Or as they say in poker, which I've never played, but they say you have to know when to hold them and when to fold them. So I want to ask you, have you found yourself having so many responsibilities that you are literally spread thin and you are drained, or you've been so hurt by personal tragedy or struggle or failure that it becomes difficult to continue doing what you're doing? So many of us, we neglect ourselves so much, especially leaders and especially people with a lot of weight on their shoulders and a lot of responsibilities that they have to conduct on a daily basis, right? We get to the point where we're so used to not paying attention to ourselves that it just becomes the normal thing. And that's an unhealthy place to be in. I remember reading an article about Beyonce at one point in time when she was rehearsing for an event that she had coming up, and she didn't realize that she hadn't eaten for 3 days. Sometimes you are so driven, you're so motivated, which is a good thing at times, but you're so driven and so motivated that you forget to take care of you. And so what I'm saying is that if your tank is on empty, if you're starving, if you need healing, you got to get that healing before you can heal somebody else. I remember hearing a story about a brother that this well-recognized pastor, his name is YPJ, just a overall great guy, right? And so one of the reasons that I actually bring this up because I want to illustrate the point that terrible things happen to great people. It doesn't matter what kind of person you are. It doesn't matter what you've done in your life. There are circumstances and situations that is going to happen to everyone. I don't know if I said that right, that circumstances are going to happen to each and every single person, good, bad, or indifferent. He was telling a story and giving a testimony about losing his marriage while his church was growing. And so this was a crazy thing. And he had shared that, there was no infidelity or anything like that. But he and his wife, they had began to grow apart and things just began to happen in their marriage. But even all during this time, his church, his ministry was continuing to grow. And so people continued to listen to his words. They continued to be fed off of his words. And he mentioned that during this time, he felt like he was dying. He felt like he was neglecting himself personally. And he said that he wished that at that time he would have actually just stopped, taken a break, taken a breather, and just listened to himself. And just take a break for himself to step back and assess the situation and get the healing that he needs. And thank God, I can't really do that story justice. So you have actually got to click the link below in the description and you've got to go check it out. Listen to him. He's an awesome preacher. He's an awesome speaker and just a great person. So again, check out his message. But even when dealing with ourselves, we have to recognize it comes to a point where you almost lose yourself. And so for this reason, you have so many people that seem like they have just so many things going great for themselves, but they commit suicide right in the middle and in the height of everything that's happening and that's going on. So what I say that to say this, my point being, don't be blinded by your success and think that just because things are going well in one area that you're okay. Many people make this mistake. They're blinded by success. They're blinded by things that are going well. And they say, I must be doing something right because everything else is happening great in my life. No, listen, that is not necessarily an indicator of good health. Just because in one area things are prospering or you're doing well in this area or your finances are great, that doesn't mean that as a whole in your spirit, mind, body, and spirit, that you're doing great. You need to check on each and every single area that's important to you. Many people have gotten left behind or left their families behind, left their relationship with God behind in order to seek something else. And they didn't realize how much they actually lost. Even if you're doing something good, you have to recognize that everything good is not always God. There have been many families over time that have been sacrificed on the altar of church work, quote unquote. Mark 8:36, it says, "What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and he loses his soul?" And so sometimes we're so ambitious that we really don't realize what we're sacrificing. The reason that this podcast is titled Faith, Family, Then Fortune is because life should be approached in that order. First, your relationship with God, then your family, which is really just an extension of yourself. When you take care of your family, you're really actually taking care of yourself. And then you can focus on all the other things that you're driven towards, right? It's not that it's not important. However, many people, they get it off balance. There is a way that you can approach these things with the help of God, with the help of your family, that things stay in alignment. Many of you have been on a plane. You've been in a flight. And one of the things that they tell you is that if you have an emergency, if there's an emergency on the flight and you have children sitting with you, they say this before every single flight. They say that you must first put on your oxygen mask first before you help anyone else with theirs. Now, I know many of you remember that, right? So why do they say this? Why is it important to put on your oxygen mask before you put on someone else's? And the reason is this, because what happens a lot of times is you're so worried about your children or about somebody else receiving oxygen before you do. And what happens is you fail to put their mask on properly because you're still panicking and you can't breathe. So you can't think clearly. You can't think straight. Now you've passed out and now you are no longer effective in helping anybody else because you haven't helped yourself. And so that's what many of us do sometimes. But when you begin to put your oxygen mask on first, then you can breathe and then you can actually help someone else without the threat of possible passing out where you can't help them. You can't help anybody if you're out of commission. Who are you going to help? The problem is that we wait until we get to a point of no return to even ask for help. And then it's too late. We're too far gone. So sometimes it's necessary to get the healing that you need first before you try to go and save the world. And listen, let me tell you, everybody needs help sometimes. You need to learn how to feed yourself first. So many leaders, so many preachers, they are up in the pulpit. And like I said, it's easy to do. I'm not judging anybody, right? They're in the pulpit and they're not getting into the word for themselves, but they're literally speaking a message based on something that they just read. And the word of God is really not on the inside of them, right? You're speaking something that you're not living. And that's how you get in trouble. And so what you need to do is you need to make sure that you're in the word for yourself. You're trying to live this word. You're trying to know this word. I don't care if you read through the Bible. I've read through the Bible several times, but you have to continue getting the word of God in your spirit. And not only that, sometimes we have mental issues that we're dealing with. Sometimes we're dealing with things on a mental level where we just need to talk to someone. We need help processing things simply because the families that we came from, they didn't know how to process things. They didn't know how to talk about the issues that they were dealing with. And so they are basically dealing with things from really a elementary type level, right? You have complicated issues that you've never gotten over from a child. And you're battling with so many things that you were battling with since you were 5 and 10 and 15 years old, stuff that happened to you early in life that you have never gotten over because you never figured out how to deal with it. I'm going to say this again. Everyone needs help sometimes. You're not Superman. You're not Superwoman. Just take Moses. Moses needed help at one point in time where they were fighting a battle and Moses was the leader and he had Aaron, Hur, and Joshua. Joshua was the weapon that God used to win the battle. So he was in the trenches fighting the battle with the other people of God. And so they were fighting against the Amalekites. All right, so this is Exodus chapter 17. And really kind of verses 12 through 14 is where it's basically talked about. So again, Moses, every time he lifted his hands up, they won the battle. And when he let them down, they lost, right? They began losing the battle. So what he had to do was he had to keep his hands in the air in a suspended position of praise and worship, right? His hands in the air represents God being in control and him recognizing that God is in control and representing three things, which is praise, worship, and submission to God. After a while, Moses' hands began getting tired. And so Aaron and Hur realized that Moses was getting tired. They recognized his need. And so they were the support and the added strength to their leaders. So they came and they sat Moses on a rock. And one of them was on one side, the other was on the other side, Aaron and Hur, and they began holding his hands up. So they provided him strength. So they lifted his hands up from morning until the evening. And the Bible even says until all of the enemies were gone. Listen, you need somebody that's going to lift your hands up, that's going to carry the burden and the weight for you until all of your enemies are completely disappeared. And I'm not saying that all of your enemies are going to completely disappear in your life, because you'll have other ones that come. But as far as you being able to carry on and do the work, you need people that you can confide in. You have to recognize when you need somebody to hold your hands up. You have to have people around you that are going to help you win this battle. Okay. And I'm not talking about I'm not just talking about those insignificant battles. I'm talking about the long haul, people that you can confide in, people that you can talk to, people who are going to have your best interest at heart. And so sometimes that's difficult to find. But listen, I want to explain to you when to press forward, when to pause, and when to pass the buck. Because many times this is what happens. We don't recognize when to press, when to pause, and when to pass the buck. And so this is why we get into so much trouble, because there are times, okay? There are times that you're going through personal things and you have to press forward. I'm not saying that every time you get a little paper cut, you just stop in the middle of your tracks and you say, oh man, I have to tend to my paper cut, so everybody else just needs to hold their breath and wait until I'm done with that. So you don't just pause every single time, but I'll let you know the difference, okay? When to press, when to pause, and when to pass the buck. When I say pass the buck, I mean just get out completely, okay? There's times when, you need to step down. You need to do something completely opposite, okay? You need to start all the way over. There are times when that needs to happen, absolutely. And I'd be lying if I told you that this wasn't a thing, okay? Because let me tell you, there are some situations that many people will find themselves in even now listening to this podcast, where you know that if somebody was to find out your secrets, your entire life would be upended. Some people might even feel like their entire life is over if the truth got out about you. There's so many people that are dealing with issues that can be catastrophic for your family, catastrophic for your business, catastrophic for your ministry, catastrophic for everything. And so sometimes you need to step down off of the pedestal. You need to step back regardless of the cost. And you need to look at the situation and say, you know what? This is going to cause a lot of hurt to a lot of people. So let me get out from under all this responsibility and just pass this on to someone else for the time being. I mean, look at the state that America is in right now. We're in the middle, the dead center of the COVID-19 crisis. And finally, the leaders of the world finally said, okay, we need to stop everything. We need to shut down the flights going in and out of the country. We need to shut down the sports arenas all across the world. We need to stop playing football, stop playing basketball, stop golf, stop gatherings of more than 10, 20 people. And we just need to shut it all down. Now, if the world, if America can say that there's a time where everything needs to be shut down so that infection doesn't spread, then why are we putting ourselves in a position where we're not willing to do that? Are we better than the world leaders that are coming together and saying we need to stop the spread of infection? So listen to me. Listen, understand the mindset, okay? We're dealing with spreading infection and things that have the potential to be catastrophic to a lot of people, and we can minimize the damage sometimes by stepping back. So here's when to press, here's when to pause, here's when to pass the buck, okay? So, and these are just some examples. They are not all inclusive by any means. However, if you can think of any other reasons, I want you to email me or drop me a comment in whatever platform that you're listening to this on. You press when you have the strength to let the struggle fuel you. When you can turn that struggle, when you can turn the thing that you're dealing with into a strength that's going to fuel you, then there's a good chance that you can actually press through it. Anytime you're doing something significant, there are people that are always going to talk about you. They're going to try to shame your character and sabotage you. And sometimes just because you're gaining recognition, these things happen to you. And that's a time when you have to press through it. You have to learn how to have thick skin, because there's always somebody that's going to come for you. There's always somebody that's going to try to attack you. There's always somebody that's going to be in opposition towards you. And if nobody else is, the enemy is. I can remember reading a scripture that says, woe unto the man that has no enemies, because, and this is my own understanding, that if you don't have any enemies, then one, you're not taking a stance on anything, and he that stands for nothing will fall for anything. And the second reason that you may have no enemies is because you're not doing anything significant. These are times when you press through. You press when you have trusted accountability that's in agreement with you. When I say trusted accountability, I mean somebody that you absolutely know and that you trust to have your back and have your best interest at heart, regardless of the situation. And usually this is somebody that you have known for quite a while. This is somebody that has shown that their relationship has stood through the test of time. Now, there's a lot of leaders and there's a lot of people that really don't trust anybody. They don't have anybody that they truly can say that they trust. And that is a sad thing, because I guarantee you that there are people that you can trust. There's just not anyone that you're willing to trust. So trust is a sacrifice, and you have to really be willing to have people around you that you can be in agreement with. And sometimes you're going to make a mistake. See, I would rather search high and low to find one person that I can trust rather than going through life and struggling by myself the entire time, especially when you get to positions where you start to gain notoriety and you start to get reputation, and you have to have people that can trust you. I can remember hearing a story about Marcus Aurelius. I don't know if I'm saying that right or not, where basically he was rising as a gladiator in the Roman arenas. And so what happened was he had one person on his side the entire time. And all that person would say to him was, "You're just a man." Because everyone around him was making him feel like he was a Superman. They were making him feel like he was just this larger than life type character. And they were pumping his head up. And so he had one person that he trusted in that would basically bring him back down to earth so that his head wouldn't get too inflated and he would just feel like he was invincible. So that one person was in his ear and they were speaking, "You're just a man. You're just a man." That's very important. You have to have trusted accountability that's in agreement with you in order to press, because they're going to tell you if this is too much for you. They're going to tell you if, hey, I think you're going about this wrong. Those are the times where you press. Now, when to pause. You pause when you are running on empty and you need to be filled up. If you're feeling drained all the time and you're just feeling like you're tired, your health is deteriorating, sometimes you can even pass on this, but it just depends on the degree. The mental stress becomes unbearable for a time. Your relationship with God is starting to be in question, or when you're no longer growing. If you feel like you're in a place where you are no longer growing, you're no longer being fed, you no longer feel that motivation to do what you're doing, you need to pause. This is a struggle. This is a very real struggle. Or when your trusted accountability is not in agreement with you. Sometimes you need to just pause and you need to step back and you need to say, okay, let me listen to what they are talking about. The Bible says that there's wisdom in the multitude of counsel. I recommend that you have more than one person that you trust to be accountable to. Everyone should have more than one person, whether you're in business, period. More than one person that you can trust in. There are people that use the old adage, it takes a village to raise a child. Not only does it take a village to raise a child, right? But it literally takes a village to live life as a man, as a woman. Today's society, it takes a village for any one person to be who they're really going to be. You can't do it by yourself. Another reason that you pause is when you don't have accountability. If you don't have any accountability, before things get out of whack, before things get out of place, before things go crazy, okay, you need to pause and you need to figure out who I can have to be accountable to. Thirdly, you pass the buck when you are no longer connected to purpose. Your health is deteriorating. All right, so I said this also in pause. Now, sometimes your health deteriorating, it can be a temporary thing, lack of sleep, or there's some things that you need to get over. There's some immune deficiencies because you're not taking care of yourself. And so sometimes you need to pause because you're not taking care of yourself. But when you get to a point where you're really starting to have serious health issues, serious things going on with your body, things that you can't overcome on your own, or possibly even life and death situations, that's time to really take care of yourself. Step back and start looking for your replacement. Another reason is if you've lost love for what you're doing. I said earlier, if you're no longer connected to the purpose, and I apologize for just skipping over that one real fast, but that is so important. If you are not connected, not dialed into the purpose and the reason that you are doing this for, if it's no longer your passion, if you begin to hate it, I mean, that's the time to really get out. There are times when you just don't love what you're doing like you used to. You just don't have that passion. You don't have that zeal, and you just don't feel connected to it. So that is absolutely when you need to get out. Another reason is if your values have changed and no longer align with what you're doing, along the same lines of no longer connected and losing the love. Another reason to pass the buck is if you don't have accountability. Again, I said this in pause. However, it just depends on the extent of the accountability. So if you have moral failures and you don't have accountability, or you have things going on in your life that are difficult for you to handle and you don't have anyone to confide in, you can set yourself on a destructive path, or set yourself on a path where things are just unraveling and you go down a huge rabbit hole and you don't know how to get yourself out. So you don't want to get yourself in a tailspin without accountability. Another reason is when you have given all that you had to this thing and you feel like you're done, you've put enough in, and now it's time to either retire, move into something else. I take this example from Kobe Bryant. I really respected Kobe Bryant, his work ethic. I respected even what he said about retiring from the game of basketball. We know that earlier this year, some things happened where there was a helicopter crash and Kobe Bryant passed away, along with his daughter Gianna and other parents and children that were part of that girls' basketball team. Just a tragedy of tragedies, y'all. And so we pray for all of his family, his loved ones, and every other family that's connected or lost somebody during that tragedy. Really, the nation is still kind of reeling over that. But many of his strategies apply to life in general and business. And one of the things that Kobe Bryant said to someone when they interviewed him, they asked him, would you ever consider going back to the game of basketball? And his response was, I have given everything that I can as far as a player to the game of basketball, and now it's time for me to move on to something else. Because so many of us, we don't know when to quit. We don't know when to give it up or to move on to something else. Our bodies are constantly changing. Our motivations are constantly changing, and sometimes you have to adjust your methods for what you're doing. And sometimes you have to completely change altogether, whether it's you changing your profession, whether you change how you do your profession, how you perform. This is absolutely imperative when it comes to business, when it comes to life in general. So you have to know when to find your replacement. So those are the three things: when to press, when to pause, and when to pass the buck. I want to reiterate, everyone needs help sometimes. So don't neglect the help that you need, because you can do more hurt than help in the end. Feed yourself first. Make sure that you are filled up. Make sure that you are spiritually fulfilled, mentally capable, and make sure that you are connected to the purpose that you are doing it all for. Yo, thank y'all for listening once again. This has been another podcast episode of Faith, Family, and Fortune. I'm your boy DJ Roberts, telling you that if you want to conquer the world, you can do that, but you must first conquer self. God bless you. Love y'all.
Yahweh, Yahweh got me falling on my face. I'm emotional, I cannot let that override my faith. Sometimes it's so heavy, feel like I just need some space. Life sometimes can bring you down, but you know you gotta elevate. Yeah, ever go through the motions? I feel like I'm broken. I've been under fire. Whoa, I feel like I'm roasted. Wonder if I'm in the right mind.